Hello and welcome back to my channel, ShyWizard. Continuing on in part 5 of this modding tutorial series, map conversion from Farming Simulator 17 to 19. I'm going to be taking a look at animated objects and the changes that need to be made to make them now work within 19. These are map animated objects like doors, gates, lights, stuff like that. I'm not going to get too deep into a lot of the different functions because there's going to be sound files that will need to be changed and various other different things like that, which you guys can work with. Just find whatever sound file that you want to set up for your light switch or your door, your gate, whatever. I'm just going to work with whatever I've got available for all of it, and I'll just change it later on. Otherwise I'll be here forever trying to set all that up. So if I go into the 17 version of the map here, we have this animated objects XML, and this controlled all of the map animated objects, your doors, your gates, whatever. So you have all your different controls and what text is going to be displayed in your F1 menu, your sound file which is going to be used and the appropriate attributes to go with that, and then all your different nodes and your keyframes for however you want it to rotate, translate, or the visibility of it when it comes to lights and things like that, whether it's on or off. This is now changed a little bit. The actual keyframing is done the same, but the actual controls, the way the controls are now set up and the sound files, they're completely different. So we'll need to make some changes in here, and also there are some changes with the script name itself. The animated object lure is not called that anymore. It's actually now called animated map object, not animated object, but we're going to have a look at that as well. So I've actually, in the 19 version, when I exported some of the buildings, they came with the animated doors already on the building or applied to the same setup in the scene graph. But if I open the map here for the 17 version in 710 editor, the majority of the animated objects are actually in their own transform group, which is here at the top of the scene graph somewhere. There it is, animated objects, and if I zoom out you can see all of these different animated objects. So you've got there's lights on the building here, there's gates, doors, various different things all over the map. So I need to work with all of those and set up the animated objects for all of those so that they will do their thing. So I'm going to export these out into their separate folder structure on the desktop so that I don't mess up anything in the FS19 version, because where I've been trying to speed things a little bit along to get things moving, every time I've exported them out into this folder structure, it overwrites my shaders. So I've got some shaders here. These are some of these are FS17 support shaders to work with objects from 17 within 19, but every time I export something out, it replaces this shader, for example, with the old version. So it will change the version 4 back to version 3, and then I have to mess about replacing them again. So for now I'm just going to export stuff out onto the desktop in a separate folder, and then make the changes there, because it's, I think, an easier way of doing it, and instead of having to repeat the same thing over and over again, replacing shaders that I've already replaced 50 times. So I'm going to take the name from the attributes window here, make a copy of that. We'll go File, Export Selection with Files, go to the desktop, create a new folder, paste in the name, open up the folder. You've watched me do this many times. Save that, keep the parent directory structure yes. So that's now all the animated objects out of there. I can close that version down, that's the 17 version. I'll put that there because I'll need to come back to that in a minute. And then I can work with all of these parts. So the shared files, I've already got these. The default cube and rough cube are no longer used. These types of reflection maps are no longer used within 19, so they are irrelevant. And the dirt normal and the mist, these are controlled by various other different things on the map already, so I've already got those in the 19 version, so I don't need those. And the shaders I'm going to be working with, the light beam shader and the vehicle shader. Now I can already set the light beam shader up for the 19 version of that shader. They are, as far as I can tell, pretty much exactly the same. They are just different versions. This is from 17, so it's version 3. Anything from 19 will be version 4. So I can point that to the installation folder for 19, but this one here I'm going to need to work with the FS17 support vehicle shader, so that will be pointing to the one in the actual map structure itself in the 19 version of the map. So if I go into here, shaders, I've got this one here, which is the 19. It's the 17 support shader for 19. All sounds very complicated, but hopefully it's making sense. So I can get rid of both of those, the shared and shaders folder. Don't need those. And then what I'll do is I'll just take these and I'm going to bring them directly over into the maps folder for the 19 version of Thornbrook. So I'll just highlight those, drag them over and move them like so. We'll merge the textures folder, and I don't need to copy anything like over because I think these would just be duplicate textures anyway. I've done this already just to make sure it does actually work the way I wanted it to work. So I don't actually need these, but you'll need to go through every single texture, because when you look at the different textures, you might have one that's called Gelf Stuff 2, and the one you're replacing it with will be called exactly the same name, but it might be a completely different texture. So you'll need to go through every single one of them and just make sure that they are duplicates and not required textures, but I know that they will be, so I can skip them. So that's fine. I don't need that folder anymore. I can get rid of that. And then what I'm going to do here is to, in my opinion, make things a little bit faster, because I need to change the user attributes for this particular script setup to do with the animated objects. I think it will be easier and quicker to do that in the actual i3D through a notepad or a text editor of some description. I'm going to use Notepad++. So I'm going to open up the i3D here in Notepad++, and like I said, the light beam shader, I can use the 19 version of that. So I'm going to do $data and point that path file name to the installation folder for 19 in the shaders folder for light beam shader. That'll be perfectly fine. My vehicle shader, I need to point that to the FS17 support shader in the actual Thornbrook map itself. So that's just going to be shaders and then vehicle shader. My default cube and rough cube reflection maps are no longer supported in 19, so I don't need either of those, so I can get rid of those. But I now need to then actually remove those reflection maps from the materials as well. So I'm just going to go Control F and then look for reflection and go find next, which will bring me down to the first one. I can highlight the line, highlight the entire line and delete it, find the next one, highlight the line and delete it, and the last one down here, highlight the line and delete it. Fantastic. So I now have all of that set up, and then I'm going to go ahead and save. And while I'm in the editor, the text editor itself, I'm going to scroll to the bottom and look at my user attributes here for the animated objects, and you can see we have the onCreate script callback, which is animatedObject.onCreate. This now needs to be animatedMapObject.onCreate for 19. So what I'm going to do is highlight all of that, Control F, go to replace, and you can see I've already done this. So I've got animated, I don't want that, I've got animatedObject.onCreate, and I'm going to replace that with animatedMapObject.onCreate. So all I do here is just with those selections go replace all, and now what I will have is in every single one of these the correct script name where it needs to be, and that will save me a lot of time, because otherwise I would have to go through every single user attribute in Giants Editor and change them there, and that would take me a lot longer to do than actually just doing it here in the text editor, in my opinion. So now I can go ahead and save, and I'll close all of that down. I can then open up the 19 version of Thornbrook here in the Giants Editor 810, and we'll import those animated objects into this map. So we'll go File, Import, Animated Objects, and you can now see they've all been brought in. What you will find is with lighting, in the editor it will look weird. It will look like this. And that's perfectly fine. Just when you get into game, it won't look like that. I think it has something to do with the way the shader works within the editor. It works differently in game. The lighting effects in game themselves, because you've got various different other effects going on in game, it cancels out some of the effects that are appearing here in the editor, because they aren't here in the editor, but they are here, or they are there in game. All again sounds very complicated, but it's not. Just if you see that, don't freak out and think it's doing weird things. It is meant to look like that. Because I originally thought myself that this just doesn't look right, but if you actually compare that to the light beam from the installation, the Giants installation folder here, if I go into the shared folder and open up the light beam in the FS19 setup in 810, it looks exactly the same. It's all flickery and a mess in the editor, but trust me, it's meant to look like that in the editor. But when you get into game, things cancel things out and it will look much better. We possibly may go into game in this video and test out some of the animated objects, and I'll show you what the lights look like in game, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. Okay, so now that we've got that into the map, we just go ahead and save it. Now I am going to, when I get to a point, I'm going to have to go around the whole map and just check every single animated object, because I'm pretty sure there are some which have not been included in that that transform group. So I'm going to have to go around and just double check that whichever ones are not included in that have been set up correctly, because I'm sure there are some over the map in places, but that's something that I'm going to be doing later on, because I think possibly this one here, yeah, that one needs to be set up. See, this one's got the wrong user attribute, so this one I would need to change in here. So I would just do like so. It's now animated map object.onCreate. So there are some that I'm going to have to go around the map and change manually within the user attributes, but the ones that were contained in their own transform group here, I could do as a whole before importing them into the map. Okay, so now that we've got to that point, I'm going to go ahead and save here, and then we'll have a look at the actual animated objects XML and talk about what needs to be changed there, because there's a fair bit that needs to be adapted. So I can get rid of both of those. Don't need that i3D and i3D shapes anymore. So in the 17 version of the map, in the maps folder or wherever it might be for the map that you're going to be working with, you have the animated objects XML. So I'm going to make a copy of that one and bring that into the maps folder here. And if I then open this up, we have that's better. We have our setup for all of the animated objects. It doesn't matter. I wish they'd line things up in here better, but I guess I'm really picky with this sort of stuff. But we have our animated objects XML, and in 17 you had your animated objects, your index, which is the object itself in the XML. This is the user attribute, our index. Then we have the control, so gate move with the actual key setup. This will be then in your mod desk, so it'll be left mouse button or right mouse button, and the actual text that you will get in your F1 menu, and then any sound file that's applied to it to make it do a click, a squeak, or whatever else, and then your actual animation itself with the keyframing, depending on whether it's going to be rotation, translation, or visibility. And then yeah, that's it pretty much, and that works with the animated object XML script in 17, but now obviously we're working with the animated map object script in 19. Some things need to be changed. And if you actually go into the installation folder for 19 and look at one of the placeables, I'm going to use the animal husbandry. So if I look at the XML here for husbandry cow large, if you look at the animated object section of this particular XML, you can see here the differences. We still have the animated objects tag and we still have the animated object tag. It's now a save ID in a placeable, but it's still going to be called an index as a map object, a map animated object. So there are some differences between the placeable and the actual map based animated object. But now the sound and control trigger setup is no longer where it was for 17 at the top here. It's actually at the bottom. Now, I don't think it would really matter if this was at the top or the bottom, in all honesty, as long as it's in the appropriate place between the tags. I can't say for sure. There may be some reason why it's at the bottom. But irregardless, you know, I'm just going to leave it where it is, to be honest with you. It doesn't really matter. So one thing you need to make sure that you link all of your sounds and your trigger nodes into the correct places. So you'll need to identify where those particular files are going to be, and you need to locate what link nodes to set up and your trigger node. So for this particular gate here, we've got trigger node 0. So I'm going to need to adapt some of these to make them work with our different controls for when it comes over into 19. So the trigger node for all of these is going to be 0, because that's where the trigger is actually set up. So that's that line there. You can literally just make one copy of it. So I will just make a copy of that under animation, make a line, paste it in, change this to 0, because that's where the trigger is going to be for every single one of them. So trigger node is 0, and the rest you can adapt however you want. So it'll be action open gate, or action open door, or action light on, and then this one will be close gate, close door, light off, or whatever you choose to put in there for the information that's going to be displayed in your F1 menu. And then your sound files. So depending again on what sound files you're going to be using, you're going to make a copy of all of this stuff and then put that below this line. So we'll create another line like so, and then put that underneath. And then these nodes here need to be linked back into these nodes here, because you're going to be working with the actual different parts of the gate and whatever else. So you'll need to look in the editor, in the Giants editor, what part is what, and then assign the link node to whichever part you want the sound file to be played against, basically. So for items like this, which have got multiple nodes, you're going to need to look at which one is going to be relevant and then link that in appropriately. So it's a little bit more involved in setting things up, the way that everything works. You can't just put one file in or whatever else and away you go. It's now got several different setups, and they will be linked into the appropriate parts of the gate so that it makes the squeak or the click or whatever at the appropriate time when you need it to. And that's pretty much it. So you need to go down every single animated object in the list and make those changes, and then once you're done, you can then go in the game and test it all out, make sure everything functions, you get all your appropriate sounds or whatever else. Like I said, I'm not going to get into changing sound files or whatever, because that will just take far too long in a video. I just wanted to do a video about the animated objects and talk about the changes. So once you've got to this point and you've added your new control setup and your new sound setup, you'll need to delete the old sound and control setup and you'll need to also remove the initial time attribute there as well, because that no longer really applies. It's just animation and duration. There is no initial time attribute, as far as I can tell anyway. I've not tested it with it. As far as I'm concerned, it works without it, and that's good enough for me. So, and then, like I said, once you've actually set all that up, you just need to go back into the game and then test it all out and make sure it works. So for this one down here, I might go into the editor, find wherever this gate is, and that's going to be I think the most difficult part is actually locating where these gates are going to be and then identifying what part is what. But theoretically, double gate will be used possibly 20 times over the map, so it will be the same node setup for every version of the double gate. So as long as you find one that's got double gate index and then find whatever sound you want to apply to whichever node, then just set that up for that one and make a copy and duplicate it for all of the other double gates that are on the map, if that makes sense. The animated object stuff is quite complicated. The other stuff is not quite so complicated. It seems complicated, but it's really not. This is actually quite complicated and can blow your mind. But just need to kind of work through it methodically and just change your match. I would recommend to open up one of the husbandry setups or whatever else, or something that's set up by Giants to give you an idea of how the animated objects are set up in the XML, and then just make your changes for whatever node and link node setup you need to work with on the map that you're going to be working with. Okay, so once we've done that, we can then obviously go through and make those appropriate changes, save it, and then, we'll go into game and have a quick look to finish up the video here. Okay, so once you've put all the files and associated everything together, you've changed the user attribute from animated object to animated map object, and you've also then set up the animated object XML with the changes appropriate there, with the new control functions, the new sound files, various other different things. I have actually taken some of the sound files from the 17 version of Thornbrook and brought them over into the 19 version. One thing I had to do was convert them from WAV files to OGG. To my understanding, OGG is an open source compression for sound files. I've not really looked into the backstory of OGG, but it seems to be really good. If you're going to work with any sound files from previous versions, or you're going to create your own sound files or whatever else, I would recommend that you work with OGG. Otherwise it will give you an error saying that you're working with a raw format of a sound file. I have no idea, this may cause you glitches and issues later on with performance. Not really sure on that. Where possible, it's not really a good idea to work with raw format, whether it be an image or a sound file. So again, use something like Audacity to convert the WAV file over to OGG, and then you'd be good to go. There's no need to rename files or whatever else. It will say in the path file name, or the actual file name will be looking for a WAV file, but the actual sound file itself needs to be an OGG, and you'll be good to go there. So let's just come into the actual game here from the escape menu, and we'll have a bit of a look. So we'll start off with this one. We've got a gate here. I've turned the volume up a little bit. I'm going to see, hopefully this will come through in editing afterwards. We'll turn it up a little bit more. And if I then come over to the gate, we have in our F1 menu open gate in controls. So I'll press the left mouse button. Gate opens and we have our sound. I'll click it again. Gate closes with sound file. Fantastic. So we'll have a look at the roller doors. Now I think this little door here I have not set this one up yet. Like I said before, there are some animated objects that have come over as separate parts. They're not included in that transform group with all the other animated objects, so I will have to go over the map and obviously find where they are and set them up separately, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. So we'll come over to this roller door here, and again it says open door. Now I've had to go through the XML and rename some of the actions because they're all set to action open gate, action close gate. So I've gone in and changed them from that to action open door, action close door. You may need to link things in your mod desk depending on what you're actually going to ask it to do. So it's like from an L10N sort of scenario. But so far just changing those names in the actual animated objects XML, I've not had any issues there. So I'm going to press the left mouse button again. Roller door opens with sound file, fantastic, so we'll press left mouse button again and close that. And it will be the same for this one over here, that will be exactly the same. And then we'll have a look at the light switch. So if we come over to the light switch, now with this particular one I set the action to turn on, and the positive action to turn on, the negative action to turn off. But when I actually came into game, the positive action of turn on gave me what you can see there in the F1 menu, turn selected tool on or off. But when I then turned the light switch on, the action to turn off just said action underscore turn off. So what I did was actually set both of them to turn on. So positive action and negative action are set to action underscore turn on, and then that gives me the same selection in the F1 menu, or the same text, turn selected tool on or off, and that I'm okay with. So we'll press the button, left mouse button, we get our sound file, the switch turns, and our light comes on. And as I said before, in game the lighting actually works the way it's meant to work, because now the shader is also being kind of incorporated with all of the other shaders, the actual environment shaders and various other different things that are in the game. So the lighting looks perfectly fine in game, even though it looks a bit freaky in the editor. And again, if I come back over to the switch here, we'll turn it off. We get the same information again, turn selected tool on or off. Light switch moves and the sound file plays and the light is now off. Now there are some different light switches on here, I think, or there may be some differences, not necessarily with the light switches but the lights themselves, the way that Lancy Boy has set this up. Some of the lights are just automatic. I think these ones here are just automatic. They turn on at night using the night time or night, I don't know, I forget the name of the script now, but they basically just turn on automatically when it starts to get dark. We do have a light switch here. If I open this door up, again exactly the same setup as what we had with the doors over there. We do have some interior lights here, and if I then come over to this switch, same text again, switch turns, plays the sound, and the lights come on inside the building. Fantastic. I'm not sure, I think this one over here on the end of the barn, again we have the gate here, open and close, and then this one over here, I think that might be a nighttime light as well. But there are, you know, you need to go around the whole map, I guess. Once you've got all of your animated objects set up, go round and check that they all function, all of the sound files play, check your console for errors if you have the console turned on. If not, then when you exit the game, open up your log text and read through there and just make sure there are no errors or warnings or whatever else. What I'll do is I'm just going to speed up time. Got the fast forward mod, so we'll just zip through until it gets a bit darker. I'm pretty sure those lights there, we'll leave, let's turn those off so we can actually see what the effects are like. There we go. I need to move that trigger a little bit because I've found that sometimes when I get a bit close or a bit, even though I have the text, it doesn't, the actual switch doesn't work, so might need to make the trigger box a little bit bigger. I'm not sure on that yet, but we'll turn those off, fast forward time again, so we get a bit of darkness here going on. Loving that real sky, that is awesome. One thing I did find in FS19, and I hope the Giants are working on this, I'm not so sure it's something in single player or something that's affected so much in single player, but in multiplayer the harshness or the transference from day to night can be quite harsh and a little bit off-putting. You know, breaks the kind of realism a little bit, but hopefully they're working on that. I'm sure they are. So these ones here, as you can see, they're slightly different. They just have coronas, they don't have light beams, but that's fine. I'm okay with that, don't really mind that too much. This one over here, I think this one, okay, that one is not on, so maybe that one is controlled by this switch as well. Let's turn this switch on. So come over here, turn the switch on, interior lighting is on. No, that one's not coming on either, so not sure on that one. That might be set up slightly differently. I'm not sure. It could be controlled by the other one over here. Let's turn the flashlight on. Some of these, I need to go through these and just see what lights are controlled by what switches. So we've got that one on. Let's zippity zip round here and see what we've got. There we go. Is that on now? Oh, we've got some lights on here. They might be night lights, I'm not sure. We've just done a full circle. Let's have a look. No, that one's still not coming on. I'm not sure what that one up there is controlled by. If I'm honest, I'll need to look into that and see how that's controlled, because I'm not 100% sure. But irregardless, we have some lights on and they do work. So, you know, I mean, that particular one over there, that may not be set up 100%. I need to go back through and have a look at the XML and how that is all linked in, what switch controls that, or however that's set up. And then for all of the other lights as well, and the doors and everything else. So you know, when you do this, you're going to have to potentially go through and do the same and just check all switches, all gates, all doors, everything else opens and closes with their appropriate sound files and whatever else. We have this one here, that all works fine. I don't think there's any light switches over here for this one. Not sure on that one. Again, that's something I'm going to have to look into and see how that one is set up. Yeah, because we're pretty much in the dark now, so if that was going to come on, I think it would have come on by now, because these ones over here are set up on the nighttime script setup. So yeah, so all good. Yeah, I think it's, you know, that's pretty much it. Just go round and check all of them. We've got some different ones here, I think. What's that for the... that's for the light posts. So they're all working on the nighttime type script, same as these ones out here. They're not run by the animated object script, they're just separate ones that are run on their own. But I think the map's coming along really nicely. We've got some grass coming up now. Some different setups. I don't know what crops are in these. I haven't done the farmlands yet. We've got some canola there looking really good. Haven't done any of the farmland stuff yet, so that's something else I need to obviously do as well. Let's just have a quick run across here and have a look what we've got over here while I'm in the in-game. So more night lights there. What we've got over here, more night lights there. So let's just have a look what we've got. That doesn't look like a movable gate. Let's check this one. There we go. Fantastic. So that's all working as well. I think these doors here are separate. They were part of something else, but they may not open anyway, because we've got some sort of a collision there that's going on for some reason. Yeah, that's something else I need to look at as well. Okay, so a lot of testing to do yet, and also I need to bring in the terrain textures. I also need to set up farmlands and various other different things, but we're getting there. So animated objects, hopefully what I've explained there points you in the right direction. I'm ShyWizard, thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.